All right, and good afternoon, everyone. SpenVentures here. We are in between Ellington and Parrish, Florida, at the Jesse P. Benjamin Gamble Plantation Historic State Park. What a mouthful, but it is a historical site here back in during the Civil War. Also taking place was this mansion behind me was actually owned uh, by Jesse P. Benjamin, who built this mansion behind me, and it was presented during the American Civil War. And we also have some landmarks, some sites, what actually happened during the time of the Civil War right here in Ellington, Florida. Um, but before that, don't forget to subscribe to SpenVentures. Click the link in the description down below. Drop a like on this video if you love historical sites and anything about American history. And we are getting closer to our Independence Day, 4th of July celebration. Is just a couple weeks away. And so, very appropriate time to be out and talking about American history. And following me on this channel, you will be able to explore a lot about American history from the Civil War to a little bit about also Florida history. But American history, definitely one of the topics on this channel of SpenVentures. So, behind me is the Governor Mansion, the gambling mansion, by Jesse P. Benjamin. And so we are going to go on ahead and tour the property of the state park here. Follow me. More information and tickets. So that sounds like it would be right here. So are they? They are open. Yay. So let's go on ahead and go inside the Civil War Discovery Train. Alright, so I've got the Gamble Plantation Historic State Park history paper, and history on Judah Philip Benjamin, the guy who hid in the mansion during the Civil War. Just about his life. And then the Patton House, which is the guy would tell me it's a blue house that sits on the right side of the mansion. So I'll be going over those as momentarily as we go through the house on the Florida frontier. This guy said this is a little museum, which I thoroughly enjoy. It looks like a real turtle, but it is not. This is just about different types of animals that are in Florida, and seashells. When Robert Gamble arrived here in 1843, land was untouched, oak hammocks, and pine flatwoods. Robert Gamble, along with his younger brothers John and William, was several men who accumulated large tracts of land along the Manatee River. Planters regarded the soil ideal for growing sugarcane and Gamble holdings, including almost 3,500 acres. You also see a snake in there. Moving forward onto the plantation, Robert Gamble, he installed up-to-date machinery for his sugar works, except for milling and refining the crop. Sugarcane was cultivated using very primitive equipment, up to slaves to make a plantation success. Their labor was backbreaking 4 years after planting the first cane in 1850. Gamble's profit from the sale of 230,000 pounds of sugar and 10,000 gallons of molasses was $9,000. Think of it as today would be a lot. But in 1849, First Sugar Works, 3 large wood frame structures were destroyed by a fire, along with the Gamble's first sugar crop. The new mill houses were fire-resistant tabby and clay brick molded by hand and laid by slaves. That was the house that Robert Gamble first owned until it burnt down due to a fire. You see a butter churn. This is how they churned butter using the milk and the milk and hard butter. And the Gamble House. This is the Gamble House, what we just saw a few moments ago. We'll be doing a tour momentarily in a few minutes. So the Gamble House still stands south of the former plantation fields overlooking the Manatee River, 2 stories high with walls almost 2 feet thick. Production costs cripple any profit Gamble may have realized from the sale of sugar. He was not able to survive the collapse of sugar prices early 1850s. In 1856, the plantation was turned over to his major creditor, Allen McFarland, who was also his brother-in-law. They also had clay bricks and what are called tabby bricks, Tabby, and poured tabby were used in the building the house. The walls were built of brick with a tabby coating. Pillars were made of tabby pies, which were laid on top of each other, covered with a tabby stucco. Clay bricks like these were used in walls like these. They had to be transported to a building site to help build the mansion. There's the man himself. Moving over to War Between the States. $2 bill issued by the state of Florida. That's a $2 bill for the state of Florida. So we roll on through here. So, book on sales by Benjamin, written in English. Just before Richmond, Virginia, the southern capital, fell, Judah P. Benjamin, Secretary of State in Confederate States of America, fled with President Davis and other cabinet members. He escaped North American mainland by way of Florida. And tradition has it that the Gamble House was his last stop. Oh well, there he is. There's Judah P. Benjamin's wife, Natalie St. Martin. Bella Chase was Judah P. Benjamin's New Orleans plantation. There's his route. Portrait. Judah P. Benjamin presented this saber to Captain James McKay, Sr. of Tampa in April of 1865. This is the saber. It was a token of gratitude for aiding in Benjamin's escape. The names of 185 slaves are written in the deed, recorded in 1858. This document describes all of Gamble's real estate and other belongings that were sold to Cofield and Davis for $190,000. Wow. The plantation stopped producing sugar on the eve of the Civil War of 1861. Now owned by Louisiana Partnership, Cofield and Davis, the slaves had been shipped away. And shortly before the end of the war in 1865, the sugar works was destroyed, by whose hand is unknown. During the Civil War, his schooners navigated the river and Gulf of Mexico by night, evading Union blockaders. Success was not always assured. McNeil lost his 12-ton mail sloop Mary Nevis to a Union blockade force as she left the river one night in January of 1862. Became a Florida volunteer. were photographed near Pensacola. Open range ranching was very common through the region. Cattle separated from herds were driven to the coast for sale and shipment to Cuba. During the Civil War, Florida supplied the Confederate armies with cattle and hogs. There they are. So we move on through the end of the Civil War. Slaves had been freed. Old-style plantations could not survive. Wind-powered sloops were gradually disappearing during the post-war years. Steamships now chugged up and down the river twice weekly. A side-wheeled steamer named Kissimmee served Palmetto and Manatee. Yellow fever, the scourge of Florida's coast, almost halted trade in 1888. All mail incoming and outgoing had to be fumigated. Oh my. So tourists enjoyed the sun on schooners, such as the Martha, built and owned by Captain Robert Fogarty. Carpet bags, such as this one, were used, travelers arriving in greater numbers as the decade came to an end. By the 1800s, Northerners were escaping their harsh winters by vacationing in balmy Florida. City Dock in Manatee, Florida. That's what it looked like at the dock in Manatee. And then, of course, the flood of settlers arrived by ship, hoping to live continual round of comfort and happiness. Ruins of the Gamble Sugar Mill, as drawn by Anna Webb in 1887. There's the rest of the sugar mill that was destroyed by a fire, and that was what was remaining. The three pillars overlooking the entrance to the mill. As you can see, the developments of what had happened after the Civil War and how it began to thrive, and especially in Florida, it began to thrive. More things began to come about. There were more buildings. There were more transportation by mail, by the sea, by railroads. It was becoming developed. Which leads us into the 20th century. Remnants of the Gamble Plantation, a small orange grove, 3 acres of the house were auctioned for taxes in 1914. For a short period after that, the house stored fertilizer. Then, eventually, efforts to restore and maintain the house are ongoing. From 1902, that was what the house looked like. Surviving through wars and hurricanes, the antebellum-style house remains only one of its kind in South Florida. Once located on a vast frontier, the house is a memorial to a way of life. There's what it looked like in 1934, and then in 1950, they began to restore it and preserve it to what it looks like today. Alright, so glad I found the visitor center, and everything there. I'm gonna go walk over here for a moment. There's a plaque on the stanchion here by this oak tree, and I'm gonna go ahead and see what it says before we start our tour. And during the tour, I'm not even gonna talk. I'm gonna let the guy explain what's in the mansion, what we're gonna be looking at through the mansion and through the Patton House, and also talk about Judah P. Benjamin. Judah P. Benjamin was the one that hid in the mansion during the Civil War. I don't know what I said about, but I am going to look here at this something here. Let's see what this says. So, Gamble Sugar Mill, one of the South's largest, was destroyed by Union raiders in 1864. Ruins are located a half-mile north on State Road 683. During the Civil War, the mansion was the home of Captain Archibald McNeil, famous Confederate blockade runner. Judah P. Benjamin, the Confederate Secretary of State, took refuge here in May of 1865 while making his escape from federal troops following the defeat of the Confederacy. The mansion was rescued from decay in 1923 by Judah P. Benjamin, Chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. So there's the mansion. On the area and the different sites around the plantation. But for now, we are at the sugar roll from the Braden Plantation River, presented by J.B. Owens to the Manatee County Historical Society. These are what rolled the sugar to chop up the grains to make the sugar and put into the mill. The sugar mill right there. That's alongside the mansion. So as we take a look, this is what the log house, based on the limited number of records concerning life of the Gamble Plantation, this is a conceptual rendering of the first type of cabin erected to the house enslaved people in the late 1840s. They were constructed of sable palm logs, which grew in abundance along the Manatee River on Florida's frontier. These same scant records indicate that sometime in the 1850s, a second style of cabin was constructed of tabby, a primitive form of concrete. Therefore, by producing a more permanent structure, it was donated by the Gamble Plantation Preservation Alliance. So this is kind of what the cabin looked like back when it was built in 1840. In order to be preserved, it was hooked on that way for Judah P. Benjamin restored it and preserved it until it was burnt down in a fire. And so it no longer stands, but right here where this is standing, where this plaque is standing, and you can see the remnant of the log house right here. This is exactly where it would be. Where I'm standing right now is where the log house would be standing if it was still here today.
Further south to get them out of this area. That way U.S. citizens could start inhabiting this area. It didn't work out that way though, so that same year, 1842, Congress passed the Armed Occupation Act. What this meant was if you're 18 years of age, a male and a U.S. citizen, you could move down here, you get 160 acres of land. As long as you stayed on that land and protected it for 5 years, it was yours free of charge.
Wow.
So 2 years later in 1844, Robert Gamble decided to take this opportunity, came down from Tallahassee down the Gulf of Mexico, and he found the Manatee River. Now keep in mind, back in Robert's time, there were no roads or cars, so rivers were a very good form of transportation. So if you look all the way down this road, there's some red signs and some trees. 30 feet past that is the Manatee River, which by the way is about less than a mile away. He ran his ship aground there on a sandbar and decided this is as good a place as any to start building his mansion. Construction started on the back section of the mansion first. As we go through, you'll notice the two sections are separated. It took an additional 5 years for the rest of the mansion to be complete.
Oh, wow.
So these columns you see going around the three-side veranda are part of what gives the mansion the architectural style of Greek Revival vernacular. So Greek Revival architecture you'll recognize from places like Washington, D.C. However, vernacular means it was adapted to the specific environment it was built in. So in this case, instead of using marble like they do in Washington, D.C., they use tabby. Now tabby is the mixture of water, sand, and lime. They manufacture that lime by taking oyster shells, you burn them, you crush them, you sift them, give you that lime that basically acts as a glue. You're able to make a type of concrete, tabby concrete. All right, last thing I'll mention before we go inside. If you want to sit down while we're inside, please just don't sit on the furniture. We sit on the window seals. Most of the house, the walls are 2 foot thick, so its window seals really extend out. The main reason for that is number one, we get bad hurricanes, so it gives it a lot more structural integrity. And number two, it helps regulate the inside temperature. So head inside.
All right.
I think you missed like 20 seconds of talking. So now we're going to go into the first room on your left.
Thank you. How lucky.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful.
I love the piano.
Oh.
Ask, do not touch.
So this is the parlor room. This is where Gamble would have entertained his guests. This interesting box, you see, time tea was very expensive, be anywhere from $50 to $60 per pound. So if someone came up and grabbed a handful of that tea and stuck it in their pocket, You can sell it for a lot of money. It's essentially 2 different compartments for 2 different types of tea. Mix it in the middle, make whatever kind of blend you want. And when you're done, you can close that, lock it up. It's a lot harder to steal a whole box than it's just a handful of that tea. So again, Robert Gamble only got 160 acres of this furniture back with him to Tallahassee. He stuck all that furniture in a warehouse, and 13 hours later, that warehouse burnt down.
Oh.
So there is no surviving Gamble furniture. All of the furniture in the house is from the same time period. The assumptions were made on what furniture was in what room. So for instance, there might not have been a piano in this room.
Right.
The way I usually like to phrase it is all of the furniture is original, but not originally in this location. All right, we're gonna go out to the left into the dining room. After you.
All right.
And watch your step go to first. That's where the kitchen is. So when the food was done, the slaves would have brought that food in, put it on the buffet table, and then from here they would have served the Gamble. This crescent-shaped dish you see here is called a bone dish. Say if he was eating something with a lot of bones in it, like fish or chicken, he would take those bones out and put them into the bone dish, and then allows for that heat to rise and doesn't stay on the bottom where people actually are. Right, I'm gonna grab this door real quick, and then we'll go to the next room.
On to the next room. We're in the.
And speaking of desks, there are 2 different styles of desks in here. There's the standard sitting desk as well as a standing desk, which I always think is kind of funny. This seems to be a lot more popular nowadays. Computer on top of it. And this would have been Robert's office. This is where he would have run the plantation out and done most of his business work. Something interesting here is this adjustable candlestick. Essentially, you could adjust the amount of light projecting onto that work surface either by running that candlestick up and getting it further away, or dropping it back down and projecting more light onto that work surface.
Nice. Yeah.
This is a twist of tobacco. So if Robert wanted to take chewing tobacco out into the field with him, he would take a twist of tobacco and just bite off a chunk of that. But of course, with tobacco, you need to spit a lot, so you have your spittoons. There's one on the right side of the desk down here. There's another spittoon under the end table in the corner. So Robert had 2 different sugar mills when he lived here. That first sugar mill was built entirely out of cypress wood, has first full harvest inside of it, got struck by lightning, and burnt out. So when he built that second sugar mill, he wanted to make it a lot more fire resistant, so he used a lot of tabby brick. Here's a good look at what tabby brick looks like. And here's an illustration of that second sugar mill, as well as an illustration of the inside of that second sugar mill. He did import 2 steam engines from England to help run that second sugar mill.
Oh wow.
And here we have a map of his land holdings. So Robert was only here for 12 years and he had 3,500 acres of land. So there wasn't enough time for all of that land to be cleared. So you'll see the dark shaded green, that represents land that was not cleared. And the lighter shaded green represents land that was cleared. Now about 40% of the land that was cleared would have been planted with sugarcane. The rest of it would have been planted with stuff they needed to be more self-sufficient, like food and cotton for clothing. And I'll talk more about that self-sufficiency in the next room. Whenever you're ready, we'll head down the ramp and just stop at that first door. Alright, so this room in the kitchen would have originally had a dirt floor. The concrete was printed by the state or as a convenience to visitors. This is the slave workroom, not to be confused with the slave quarters. The slave quarters would have been further away from the mansion. There's a pretty good illustration out there that gives you a good idea of what they probably looked like, but keep in mind they were built out of wood. There's not a lot of written history about their exact design, so that illustration is the best estimate. So there were 3 classes of slaves back in Gamble's times. There were field workers, skilled laborers, that's anyone who skilled stuff like blacksmithing, coopering, which is making buckets, or cobbling, making shoes. And the 3rd class of slaves would have been house servants. These people were cooking, cleaning, or doing chores, for instance, ironing. So an old iron, you open that up and then take the hot coal and ash from the fire and fill it up, weigh 15 or 20 pounds when it's full. They'd use it for several hours at a time. Imagine it's a lot more difficult with ironing nowadays. Like I said before, they were very self-sufficient here. They did make their own candles. To do this, there were 2 methods. One of which is the stick and wick method, where you tie those wicks to a stick, dip it in that bayberry wax, pull it up, let it cool down, just keep doing it until you got that thickness of candle you wanted. The second method would be candle molds, which of course would be a lot quicker and easier to use. This was a sugarcane plantation, but they did grow cotton for clothing. Once they had that cotton, they would reel it into threads of yarn. They wanted to know exactly how much thread they had and exactly how much they were going to use, so they had to count it. To do that, they used the weasel. The idea is you push down the button on the weasel, you attach that thread to one side, and then you spin the weasel. Once you've spun the weasel 50 times, the button pops up, pop goes the weasel, and you know exactly how much yarn you have.
Is that what
Yes.
Is that where that came from?
Wow.
I have one more saying for you in this room.
Oh wow.
So this is lye soap. Lye soap is essentially made out of animal fat. If Gamble wanted to take a bath, the bathtub would be taken upstairs, then buckets of water would be brought up by the slaves. He was not married and did not have children while he lived here. If he had, they all would share that same bathwater. With the man of the house, wife, oldest down to the youngest, and that's where the saying "don't throw the baby out with the bathwater" comes from, right? Because the baby would have been the last one in that dirty bathwater.
Ew.
Feel free to take pictures for a second. I'd love to live in this house, but it's so pretty, and then you get inside and no electricity.
You don't really have nothing.
So this is the largest fireplace in the house. That's because all of the cooking would have been done in this fireplace. It would have been running almost 24 hours a day just to keep up with the amount of food that had to be made. And if you look around the room, you'll notice there's no oven. So if you want to cook something like a cake or a pie, you'd roll up that dough and then you throw it into the spider pan. The idea is you stick the spider pan into the fire and then you cover it in that hot coal and ash, and now it'll cook from the bottom to the top evenly and it acts as an oven. And then when you're done making that cake or that pie, you want it to cool down, but you don't want all the bugs to get to it, so you stick it into the pie safe. Now the pie safe has holes that are just small enough that allows that pie to cool down. Any bugs that try to get inside will get stuck before they can actually get to that food.
Oh, okay.
You might be familiar with this. It's called a dry sink.
Yeah.
The idea is you take your bucket of water from the cistern outside, and then you wash your dishes directly in that bucket. Any water that spills out ends up on the, or rather ends up in the dry sink and not on the floor. When you're done, you just scoop up all that water back into the bucket, and you have no mess. Here's a section of the wall where the plaster has been removed. Keep in mind the entire mansion would look like this if there was no plaster on it. Just gives you a better look at that original tabby, all those oyster shells inside of it.
Oh, wow. Let's see.
We're going to head up to the left to the water cistern.
Okay.
Gamble knew coming down here that the groundwater was very dangerous. It was prone to dysentery, plus it had a lot of sulfur in it. So he decided to collect rainwater from the roof and funnel it into a water cistern. Now, as it enters the other side of the cistern, it actually flows towards us, and it passes a tabby wall in the middle. Now remember, tabby is made using lime, so it's essentially limestone. Limestone acts as a natural water purifier, so you don't have to boil that drinking water. So then his only problem would be all the mosquito laying their larvae inside that water. So he put little minnows, little mosquito fish, inside that cistern that eat all that mosquito larvae.
Wow.
And then you'd have to clean out the cistern every so often.
Wow. That is so cool. How do we know all this stuff?
I believe it was probably just common knowledge at that point.
How long did it take you to learn all this stuff?
A couple weeks. I've been here 2 months, so a couple weeks.
You're better, you're making it all up.
Confederacy stored documents. Next to that, you'll see 2 stones. They look like headstones, but they're actually memorials. The one on your left is the World War I memorial, and the one on your right is the Confederate memorial.
Oh.
Behind that, there's a white picket fence. There's 4 holes that go about 10 foot into the ground. They're lined with brick and tabby. The idea is they would smoke the meat and then store it in those pits to help keep it fresh.
Oh, wow.
So Gamble was here for 12 years. During those 12 years, there were 2 very bad hurricanes in the 1840s, one of which one of his brothers died in.
Oh.
In the 1850s, there were 2 very bad winters that destroyed his crops. Not to mention that first harvest burnt down that first sugar mill. By the time he got his second harvest, sugar prices had already started dropping. Then in 1856, the Third Seminole War started, which meant he had to spend money fortifying his entire plantation. At this point, he was $190,000 in debt. So he sold all of his property back to his creditors for $190,000, including his 192 slaves, moved back to Tallahassee and opened another sugarcane plantation, which was a lot more successful, by the way.
Why did the sugar cane go, or the price go up?
I would assume because more people started growing it, but I don't have a good answer for you on that one. So the property was used by the Confederacy for a small amount of time during the Civil War. They used it for blockade running to Cuba. I think Cuba's that direction. When the Civil War ended, I keep jumping to the inside stuff about Judah P. Benjamin. When the Civil War ended, the property was returned back to his creditors, who in turn sold it to the Patton family, unrelated to General Patton, by the way. Now, Dudley Patton decided he did not want to live in the house. At this point, it was now the 1890s, so the house is 50 years old. So there were some modern amenities that could be put into the house. It would just cost too much money to try to implement that, so he decided to build his own house. That is the blue house you see out here. That is the Patton house. But because the mansion was empty, he figured it may as well be used for something. He started storing fertilizer inside. That fertilizer destroyed all of the original wood, and it all had to be replaced.
Oh.
So remember, all of that original furniture burnt down in Tallahassee. Now all of that original wood is gone. So essentially all that remains of the original 1840s construction is the tabby. So that's all the columns and all the walls.
Why is there a door on the top that goes nowhere?
There used to be a second floor.
Oh.
If you haven't finished up the visitor center, if you go back through there, there's a, I don't know if it's a whole display, but there's at least a picture that gives you a better idea of what the Patton house used to look like.
Okay.
All right, we'll head around and head inside. This entire upper floor was his bedroom. So the next
Wow.
room would have actually been his bedroom. This first room would have served as more of an extra parlor. Because he wasn't married, he didn't have children while he lived here.
Okay.
We do call this the Judah P. Benjamin bedroom, though. Judah P. Benjamin was the Secretary of State for the Confederacy, serving a couple of other secretary roles for the Confederacy, as well as serving as a senator from Louisiana before the war started. When the Civil War ended, though, a $30,000 bounty was put out on Judah's head, so his options were to turn himself in or run and hide. He decided to run and hide. So this is the last room Judah hid in before fleeing America. He did eventually get picked up on the Manatee River. He was taken to the Bahamas and then Cuba. He ended up in England, where he studied law, becoming a barrister, eventually serving as Queen Victoria's head counselor. So you'll see here a picture of Judah during the Civil War, another picture of Judah when he was serving as head counselor to Queen Victoria. Kind of switch up topics here. You'll notice there are no mosquito nets on the windows. So if you want to keep those bugs off of you at night, you use something like a 4-poster bed. The idea is you drape those mosquito nets around the 4 posts, and then you put on really long, baggy, thick nightgowns, keep those bugs off your arms and your neck. Definitely trade off between sweating or getting bit by a mosquito. And again, we have a 4-poster bed, except this 4-poster bed is also a rope bed. It's essentially a bunch of ropes suspended underneath the mattress to give it support. But being rope, it eventually loosen, you need to tighten it. So you stick the key into here, push down on that, and it will turn that post, and tighten up all those ropes. And that's where the saying "sleep tight" comes from tightening the ropes in your rope bed, right?
Oh. Oh, man.
So there's not a lot of cold nights in Florida, but they were prepared. They have a fireplace in most rooms, as well as a bedroll. It's essentially an extra blanket wound around this post. So if he was laying in bed at night, he'd reach out, grab that blanket, and just unwind it over himself. And of course, there was no indoor plumbing in his time, so if he wanted to use the restroom at night, he'd have to use something like a honey pot or chamber pot. It's the white bowl you see on top, or the thunder box, that's the box you see underneath. And then of course, the slaves would have to come in the morning and clean that out.
Yeah.
We can go down these 2 steps into the last room. When that was built, initially they would have been used as a bedroom and an office. Then once the rest of the mansion was built as an extra office, extra bedroom. Right now they're being used for storage, so unfortunately we won't be able to check them out. This is the dressing room. Something notable is that back in Gamble's time, you got taxed for every single room you had. So even if you just want a little closet hanging off of this room, it counted as an additional room and an additional tax. So to circumvent that room tax, they would use something like a wardrobe. Because furniture was not taxable, you could avoid that closet tax. That's why you see a lot of wardrobes in older houses, older American houses.
Right.
Gotcha.
This is pretty much going to conclude the tour. You're more than welcome to walk out to the 2 memorials as well as the old smoking pit. Behind the mansion are those 2 sugarcane presses, as well as that illustration of the slave quarters. And if you didn't get a chance to finish up the visitor center, I would definitely recommend that. There's also a lot of reading material in there I can point out to you.
Okay.
If you have any questions, feel free to ask me now, or I'll be back at the visitor center. Otherwise, we're going to exit down to the right, up that same staircase we came up. And we're good on time if you want to take some pictures in here.
Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed the tour of the mansion. The guy was great. Very good tour guide. Awesome job. Talked about everything that was on the grounds at this historical site. And Judah P. Benjamin, who was the one that hid out in the mansion because of the Civil War. Then when it ended, he was able to thrive in his possessions. So, but now the Confederate Veterans Memorial from 1861, 1865. That was when the Civil War was. It was erected on October 10th of 1937. State Commission, Miss R.P. SpenVentures Chairman, Miss Marion Sinclair Dixon, and Miss R.E. Dowling.
I don't know.
Of course, here, this is where they talked about the wait. This is where they stored their meat. Preservative.
Yep.
And processed it. Stored in each of these square square rooms. Preserved, processed the meat, which then was taken back to the mansion. Of course, our so now we're heading over to the Patton House, which is the blue house here. And one of the ladies was saying that the upper room that leads to nowhere, which actually used to be, there used to be, it was like an office up there, but it's closed off. But for now, we can go and take a look and read about the Patton House. So this is the Patton House, the big blue house, and that is a door that leads to nowhere, which actually used to be a porch that was strung across there, but no longer there. And it was built in the 1890s by Dudley A. Patton. It was furnished and operated by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. All right, so thank you all for joining me here at the Gambler's Mansion of Judith P. Benjamin Historic Plantation Mansion. Tour inside the mansion. Great group. Had an awesome tour. So much information. You'll hear all about it on this video. Thank you guys for watching SpenVentures. Appreciate all the subscribers. Be sure to click that down below. Subscribe. Ring the bell for notifications. And comment down below if you've been to a historic state park anywhere in the U.S. or here in the state of Florida, the Sunshine State, where we occasionally get rain. But honestly, a great time here. Learned a lot about the past, and from the Civil War to the Second and Third Seminole Wars that took place on right here on this battleground, on the grounds of the plantation. And so with that, we will call it a day here on this great Sunday afternoon, and we will see you all on the next SpenVenture. Be sure to subscribe, drop a like on this video, leave comments. We'll see y'all real soon.